Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and this amazing series. I am Aditya. In this series, we are creating a chat application using MERN stack, and in today's video, we are gonna see how to create REST API endpoints in Express, and also we will see the concept of MongoDB. We will also see how to integrate MongoDB using Mongoose library with our Express app, and we will also see how to separate the routes. So all this we are going to see in this video. So without any further ado, let's begin. Okay, so let's first understand what we have here. So we just have a minimalistic app that we created last time, and now what we need to do is first we will just create some routes. So here I'm going to say app.get. Let's say I want a user route which shows the information on user based on the ID, and I want to pass the ID in the URL. So I can just put /user, and then I can put the parameter, let's say ID with :ID. Then we will have our simple function, request response function, and then we can just say response.send. Now to display this ID, we just do something like this. Request, because it's coming in the request, it's in the params, and ID. Now if we go to our browser, go to a URL which is user21, something like this, we will see 21. That's great because we went to a browser or URL with a parameter in the URL of 21, and that's just coming over here. It's not just we have to pass one parameter, we can pass multiple parameters. So if I say if I want to have another parameter, let's say name, then I can just go here and let's say if I do something like this, request.params.name, and then all I have to do is go to a route, and let's say I type here Aditya, and it shows ID and name. That's how it works. Now the problem here is, suppose if you are making a register request or some request where you are making a post request. Now passing those parameters in the URL may not be a good idea. So you need to pass it in a JSON as a JSON payload or in a request body. So how to do that? Well, that's pretty simple as well. So let's first get it back to ID because we need this one. And here we will have a post request, which will be for register. So let's say user register, and this will take again function request and response callback. And here to make this work, let's say we are passing, let's say email, const email equal to request dot, it will be in the body of the JSON. So in the JSON body or in the request body, there will be a JSON payload where we will have a key of email. And to make this thing work, we need to make sure that whatever JSON payload we get, it is parsed into a JSON. And to do that, we have this middleware app.use express.json. So this middleware will make sure that whatever request is coming in, if it has JSON payload, it will be parsed into JSON object properly so that we can use it here properly. Okay, so let's do it quickly for password. So password will be request.body.password. Let's take the name as well because we will need the name of the user. So request.body.name. Perfect. Now we will then write our database function to put it in our MongoDB. So before going to MongoDB, let's quickly now see how we can keep these routes in separate file. Now first let's understand why we need to keep it in the separate file. Now if you see, these routes have the prefix of user, like there might be login for the user login, there might be getting contacts for the user contact, there might be some other user route, and it becomes more structured, more organized, and more easy to understand for a developer who is working on this code, maybe after you or maybe with you, to understand like where to find those user routes. So if we have a file, say user route file or just the user.js in the routes folder, then your developer colleague or you, even after some time when you get back to the code, knows that okay, the code, the files, all are there. So it becomes well organized, and it's also easy for proceed forward with the development. So for that reason, to keep our code organized, we will create a folder here, routes, and inside this route we will create another file which is user.js. Now user.js will have all the routes related with the user. So what I'm going to do is I will just simply copy this from here go over here and just paste it over here. Are we done with this? No, because we need to make changes here now. So first we need to get our express, require express, and then we will need the router. It will come from express router, and wherever we see this app, we just need to substitute it with router. Now if you notice, in index.js we have the app instance where we are using get and post request, while in the user.js we have the router instance, express router instance, we are using get or post. This is because this here we are creating a router. So like other frameworks, in Laravel you have web.php where you have routes defined. In Django you have separate, you can create the routes in separate files as well. In Vue there is a router, in React there is a router as well. So this thing is pretty close to that concepts, and all we need to do here is export. So we are going to import this because we need to tell into this index.js, because index.js is our entry file. We need to tell index.js that whichever route has user prefix, it should go here. To do that, let's first export our route. So here I'm going to say user router, user, if I type it correctly, will be the router. Now what is the syntax here? So whatever we want to export, the variable and the value of that variable. So this user router, we will, when we import in index.js, we won't say const router. We can say that, but even if we say something like this, so if I say here const router equal to, now this will come from this route folder. So I'm going to say routes user. Now if I want to use this user router, I need to do router dot user router, but there is a shorthand way to do that. What we need to do here is we can simply take the user router with destructure syntax. So this destructure syntax, what it will do is, from this require import, like whatever we are importing from the file, it will only look for this user router and it will straight away store the value in this variable as it is, and then we can use it. Now one thing we need to make sure is this variable value should exactly match on what we want to export here. So if it's user router here, then in this curly braces it should be user router only. Now after that is done, we have here one middleware of JSON. After that JSON middleware, we need to say that another middleware for whichever URL has a prefix of user, it should go for user router. Okay, so whichever URL having the prefix of user, it will go to user router, and that user router will deal with the routes of user. So in this case, we just need to remove all this user prefix. Need to remove from here as well, and then it will know that whenever there is localhost colon 3000 /user/id, it will straight away come over here. Okay, now let's test it out if it works. So if we go back again over here and let's get it to 21 again, and we are getting undefined because we have this name here, so we can just remove that and it should be working properly again. So we just go back, refresh, there, great. So we structured our files properly. Now next thing to do is we also need to make sure that these things, like these functions, they are like a small functions for now, but further down the line you might need to reuse the code, you might need to reuse certain functions here and there, and to structure these things as well, we can create another folder where we will only have these functions, and for each route we'll just call it by the name of that function. So this folder, you can call it as a controller, because that's what generally in MVC architecture it's known as, or you can call it like any folder. So you can call it business logic, you can call it whatever you like. I'm going to call it controller. I will say controller, and in this controller there will be a user controller, user controller.js. Now this user controller will be responsible for all the routes, all the functionalities of the routes which has user prefix in it. So here I'm going to say first function. So whatever the function is. So here I'm just going to call this, let's work with the register first. So I'm going to say function register. It takes request and response as usual. And then whatever this code is, I can just simply cut from here and paste it over here. And then all I need to do is just export dot the register function. It will go from here and we can catch it over here. So I can say const register. Now, if you notice, we are in routes folder. We need to get it from the controller folder. So how to do that? Well, it's very simple. We put double dots. So that means we are going 2 directories up. So from routes, we are going to menu to mon tutorial. In that, there is a folder of controller, and from there we are getting user controller. And then simply here, we just remove this and write register. So clean and nice in just one line. So whatever function we have for register, we have it here. And if we need any code reuse, we can just write those common functionalities here and just reuse it. You'll get to know in a moment. So that's how we can structure our routes and the controllers or the functions for that route. Now let's check the MongoDB aspect of it. Alright, so if you're using Windows, I would recommend MongoDB Community Server. I guess it works for Mac as well, but just double check if it does. So if you download MongoDB Community Server from this website, which is mongodb.com, try download community. From there, you just need to download the community server. Once you download it and install it, you can then use an application known as Mongo Compass, which will be helpful for creating our playing around with our documents or collections. Okay, so for instance, I have created a user document database here, which is having the collection of users. But before you come here, you will see something like so if I go back to this so here on before you connect, you will see your local databases like this. But before that as well, you will see something like this. So if I go to new connection, you will see something like this when you first install the app. Now, if you are using MongoDB instance on a cloud, maybe let's say DocumentDB of AWS, just an example, or something else, then in that case, you just need to put the URL as it is following the syntax. So there is MongoDB plus SRV, then the username of your database, the password of your database, the cluster, where is it in, and the host, and whatever the name of that database is. So this is how it works. Now, we are using localhost server, so we don't need to worry about doing all this thing. All we need to do is just hit connect, and once you hit that connect, it will take you to here. Now, by default, you will see 3 databases. So it will be admin, config, and local. Now, first, let's just understand what is a database, collection, and document in NoSQL or MongoDB, and then we will try to relate it with SQL. Now, in SQL, you have tables. Each database has lots of tables, and in all those tables, there are columns and rows. Okay. Now, these tables, let's take an example of, let's say we have users table. In that, you will have a column of name, email, password, maybe role, and other stuff like maybe UID and all the stuff later down the line. Now, suppose if you want to add a column of, say, contacts, or if you want to add a column of, say, maybe messages, or any random column to that user, which is only applicable for some users, but it's not applicable for other users. So you can add a nullable column. That's fine. But suppose if you don't know what new column is going to come in once you go further down the line in your application, and you may have like some extra columns coming in which you never know, or your horizontal or your columns length are already exhausted. In that case, you might need to consider of maybe having a new table, or maybe creating those new tables, creating those relationships, and all those stuff. So it might get messy if you have your data in an unstructured fashion. So for that, to solve those problems of unstructured database, we have NoSQL database. So we will be using MongoDB, which is a NoSQL database, as MySQL is for SQL, MongoDB is for NoSQL. So here in NoSQL, we have something known as collections, So collections acts as the table. Each collection has documents. So each document acts as a row in a table. Each document has a key value pair. So each key acts as a column in that table. Now the good thing here is when you have collections, you can, as those are like literally JSON's key value pair, you can dynamically add those values however you like or remove for certain users however you like. So it's kind of like super flexible and super scalable in terms of horizontal aspect. The second point to note is, as NoSQL, in NoSQL there are no relations model. So if you want to create relations between a user and let's say a message, in that case you cannot create a direct relation as you can create swiftly in SQL databases. So there are some pros and cons on SQL and NoSQL. So I'll definitely recommend you to have a read on it. It's a super interesting topic, I would say. So depending on what is your business problem, what route you want to go down for your application. Generally, you might encounter that you are using both SQL and NoSQL because that's how it works. For even for major applications, they use both the databases in one way or the other for the best suitable solution for that problem. So it depends totally. But here, as we are using MongoDB, so let's first understand what we have. So we have the tutorial database, which we have just created, and there is a users collection. So in this collection, I can add document. So if I add a document, let's say, if I go over here and let's give it something like name as Aditya, email as aditya@example.com. Now, if I insert this, you will see this has created a document over here. Now, this document is literally like a JSON key value pair, and one collection can have multiple documents. And inside each document, there can be sub collections or arrays. So, for instance, I can have, let's say, if I get something like this, so insert document, and let's say I have another one where we have contact. Oops, contact. Now, if let's say if I want to keep it as an array, then I can just put it here like Aditya Adi something like this. And if I insert this, you will see like this contact has become as an array, and you can have inside one collection, you can have other collections. So these are like simple string array, but you can have like a JSON object inside that array. Like each item in that array can be a JSON object or JSON. So this is how it works. So after we have this, now let's go to our application and let's see how we can connect it. To connect it with our application, we have a package which is already installed, which is Mongoose. Now the documentation here is super amazing. It explains everything in depth. So we will cover only the things that we are going to use. But I would definitely recommend you, if you are new to Mongoose, to see the documentation. It has some very good examples. It has some very good explanation as well. So let's first begin with the connection. So if we go to quick start, it will show you how to connect. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a file here which will be known as connection.js. Now inside this connection.js, I will simply copy paste this function or this code actually with some changes here and there. So first change I need to do is remove this line, and the second thing I need to do is rename this to connect, and the third thing I need to do is export.connect equal to connect. Now what's happening here? So we are having an asynchronous function. Why asynchronous? Because we are awaiting for mongoose.connect. So mongoose.connect is in itself a asynchronous function which is going to return a promise. Now when in JavaScript, when something returns a promise, you need to resolve that promise to move forward. For instance, suppose if I want to insert a document in a collection, I need to first connect to the database. Once I connect to the database, after that, I can then insert it. And to make it work, I have to do something like then a callback, and then in that callback, I will have the code of inserting. Now I cannot do it for every functionality that I'm going to write. So what I'm going to do is I will just make it as a synchronous instead of asynchronous. So I'll make it in a synchronous way that, so this await keyword will make sure that the connection is first established. This function of connection is run properly. And after it is finished, then it goes to the next line. So we'll put here instead of test, because our the database name is tutorial. So we'll put it as a tutorial. That's great. Now let's save this and let's go to another to the main folder here, and let's create another folder. So here we will have our schemas. I'll explain what are the schemas, and there will be another folder for models. Okay, so let's first understand what are the schemas. So let's create a first schema for our user collection. So user schemas schema.js. So a schema is nothing but the definition of your collection, or it's a skeleton of your collection. Okay, so if I go to one schema example here, you will see we have a block collection, and in that block collection it shows what should be each key, like what should be the type of each key in that collection. So suppose if we have only, let's say in our case we will have name, email, password, and maybe some contact. So in this case, name will be string, password will be string, email will be string, and contact will be an array. So we can have a collection schema defined like this. So let's quickly copy this code and let's modify it according to our need. So here first we will do, instead of import, it will be const mongoose. It will come from require mongoose. We will be using ES5 syntax. Now here instead of block schema, I will say user schema. And here we don't need title, we need name, we need email, we need password. Instead of comment, we will have contacts, and it's gonna be array. So I'll just put it as an array because we will be putting a list of UUIDs in that, which brings me to, so for now I'll just uncomment this, which brings me to other field, which is UUID, and this will be string again. Oops. String, and we should be good for this. Now if you notice, you can also have a default value. So you give it the type and you can give it a default value of whatever the default value is. So that's all for now. Now next thing we need to do is, so if we go for models, so here we need to create a model. So let's create a file here saying that user model.js. Okay, now let's first understand the relation between schema, model, and the collection. Okay, so schema defines your skeleton of your collection and each document of that in that collection. Okay, so model is nothing but it is a way of interacting with your collection. So in our database we have collection as users. So to make our life easy, we will create user model which will help to write or to interact with all those CRUD operations with our collections. So generally as SQL, there are MongoDB queries as well. So for instance, there is a Mongo query for select, there is a Mongo query for find, update, and all those things. Like there are Mongo queries. So instead of writing those raw Mongo queries, we can substitute with the models, which will help with just like simple functionalities. So let's see an example. So let's first import, not import, const mongoose equal to require mongoose. And then here we will also need our schema because that's what we are going to use. So we need to have our user schema. So if am I exporting it? No, I haven't exported it. So export dot user schema equal to user schema. Great. And then our model, we can import it. So I'm going to say user schema. That's going to come from require, not this much. It will go to schemas. It will go for user schemas. Now we need to create a variable here. Let's say that's going to be user for our user model, and that's going to be mongoose.model, and it will be, the name of the model will be user, and it will take a schema. So we'll create a variable schema. Now to make that work, like to make this schema work, we need to first have const schema, and it will be from mongoose.schema user schema. Okay, so we'll create, we already have a structure of the schema, then we'll create that schema over here, and then using that schema we will create a user model. Now what this is going to do is, in case, suppose if we didn't have that user collection there over here, then it will automatically create user collection with the name users. So whatever is the name of your model, it just converts it into plural form and just gives the name to that collection. Now let's export this. So I'm going to say export dot user equal to user. Great. So a model is set, controller is set, schema is set. Now it's time to see it in action. So let's go to user route, or user controller actually, and let's write the logic for connection, inserting in our database. So let's first do const connect. This is gonna come from connection. Then we will need user model. This is gonna come from models, user model. Okay, now before we go for anything, we need to first have the connection, and as we are doing it await connection, so we need to connect, we need to put async function, async keyword here. This is because this connect is an async function, and we kept it async function so that we can await for this. Okay, if you want to use await and if you don't put async, then it won't work. So await keyword only works inside an async function. Okay, so we then go back over here, await for our connection, and to await for that we need to make it as a async function for register here. Now this is done, this is done. Now next thing we need to do is, here we will say user equal to new user, and this will take in the document data. So here we will have email as email, password as, now here we cannot store plain text password, we need to encrypt it. So we will include our bcrypt library that we downloaded last time, require bcrypt, correct. And then now bcrypt hashing is also a asynchronous function, so we need to do it in a synchronously because we want it straight away over here. So we will say bcrypt.hash. So this one is asynchronous, this one is synchronous. Here we will first pass what we want to hash, and the next parameter will be the salt or the number of rounds that we need to do. So here we will say 10. Okay, so we will do 10 rounds of hashing. Now next thing we need is name, and that will be our name again, and then we will need UUID. So we also downloaded yesterday a package of UUID, so we'll just do something like const v4, and that will come from UUID package, and then we can just generate the UUID like this. Cool. So we have name, password, email, UUID all set, and once this is done we will do await. So this is our document, and we will just simply do save. Instead of big U, it should be small u because we are storing it over here. The instance is stored here and we are just doing it save. Okay, now what's happening here? So we created the instance of our model, which is nothing but our collection, and in that collection we are saving a document. So this is the document that we want to save, and instead of writing some Mongo query, what we are doing is we have the package, so let's make the best use of it. We just use one function in that safe, and this function will do the querying part for us, like writing that query and just inserting in the database. So we just don't need to worry on that thing. So we just have, like, it makes our life so simple in terms of saving the document in the collection. Now once we have this, we can just simply send our user. So this will go to the front end. Now as we are using this as a post request, so if I go back to our user route, should be here. Yeah. So as this is a post request, I cannot simply do it in a browser. I need to use third-party software like either Postman or Insomnia or even VS Code API tester will do. I'm going to use Postman. So let me quickly go to Postman. Right. So in the Postman, we have our route over here, localhost 3000 user register with a post request and whatever data we want to send. So let's send this and see what we get. Okay, so if we go to body, and here you will see that, okay, this is our UUID, that's our hashed password, and everything is there. Now let's see if it's saved in the database. So if we just quickly refresh this, you will see this is our new record. That's great. Now one problem here is, if I put here something like, let's say, script alert hello and script, something like this, and suppose if we send this email, which is not actually an email, it's literally something spam, it is still going inside over here. So if we just refresh it, it is still taking in. We don't want this thing, so we need to validate our input before putting it into database. So how to do that validation? So there is a library known as Express Validator. So let's quickly download that. npm install Express Validator. Now this will quickly install our package, and then we will just do npm run start again to start the server and go back to our code. Now we want that thing to be first put on the register request. So here I'm gonna take const body equal to require, and this is gonna come from Express Validator. Now this body is different from request.body. Okay, so this body is gonna be a function. So we will add this as a second parameter. So first is our URL. Second parameter if there are any handlers or if there is any middleware, and the third parameter is our function to carry out on that URL. So here I'm going to say body. So in that body, I want to see for my email key. So this is the key that should match what is coming from the front end or from the request. So in that email key, I want to make sure that it's an email. And I also want to make sure that it's a unique email. So I don't want each user, like one user to have, or more than one user to have the same email. I don't want that. I wanted that one user should have only one email. So more like a unique thing. So how to do that? Well, it's pretty simple. So if we go to our user controller, let's write a quick function here, which will be function get user by email. And here we will pass an email. Then let's make it a sync function, and then let's quickly do await connect, and then let's quickly do something like return. So we will do user dot find. Now if you have used SQL, in SQL there is a where clause which says, let's say something like select star from table, the table name, and where email is something something. Same in MongoDB, you can use those querying with Mongoose. So here I'm gonna say user. So in that user collection, find user which has mail as the email that is given over here. Now I just want one user. I don't want to keep on checking it for all users. So I'll just say find one. Okay, and once you got it, like this is the query, so just execute this query. Okay, now this will return us the user whose email matches this thing, like this email that we have given. Now we will just export this. So export dot get user by email equal to get user by email. Cool. Now, if we go to our user.js again, all we need to do is to have our customized logic. So these are the functionalities given by the package. You can also have your custom logic. So here I'm going to say custom validation. And in that, this custom validation is going to take a function. So this will be a function. So in this, we will have our email. And here, what we are going to do is we will say const user equal to await and see get user by email. So we just need to import it. So we will just take it over here, get user by email. And if there is a user, so if we find a user, then in that case we need to return. So we need to reject this request. So we'll say promise dot reject, and we will pass an error saying that user already exists. Great. Also, we can do the same thing for password. So let's go over here and let's write the logic for password. So body password. So we need to make sure that the password is of length, let's say minimum length should be 6, maximum should be maybe 14. We can also do the same thing for our name. So if we want to say body and if you want to say name, we need to make sure that name is not empty. So it's not empty. That's what we want to see. And it should be good to proceed forward. Great. So we have our validation here. Now we are rejecting the promise here. Now we also need to make sure for other validations to work. We go to our user controller and we just import const validation result, and that's going to come from express validator. Good. Now here what we are going to do is before even we connect, we want to make sure that if there is an error, so that errors will come from const errors equal to validation result, whatever are the errors in that request. So when it goes to this route, when it goes for this validations, if there are any errors, it will straight away put those errors in the request. Then we can catch that over here, and we will say if we already have if below. So here we will say if errors dot is empty. So if these errors are empty, that's great, we proceed forward. But in case if these errors are not empty, so we put an exclamation mark here. If these errors are not empty, then we just say return res dot status of 400 and the JSON with all the errors. So it will be errors will be the key, and these errors will be the value of this const errors into array. Good. Now let's just test it out and let's see what happens. So if we go back here again, and if we put this thing again, if we do a send request, yes, we will having some error. So it says await is only valid on. Okay, so I guess we didn't put a sync on some function. I guess I know where did we do that. So here we just need to do a sync. Cool. Now if we go back again here, let's do it again, and it says invalid value email body. It also says your user already exists. So it shows us two validation email, first for invalid email and the second one for the user already exists. So now let's check if it has insert in the database. So this was the last entry. So if we refresh it, you will see it hasn't insert in the database. So if I remove this just to check completely that if it does, now if we send the request again, we get this error saying that invalid value, and if we go back again here, refresh, and it's not in database. So we can like protect our database with validations like this. Okay, so let's see if it works for the unique one. It actually did. So let's just try again. So let's go here and try example.com. The user already exists. If we go back, user already exists. Perfect. So that's how we can protect for unique users as well. So that's all in this video. In the next video, we will see how we can protect our routes with JSON Web Tokens, with JWT in general. Then we will write the logic for login, then getting the contacts, adding the contacts, and other route APIs as we proceed forward. So see you in the next video. Till the next time, goodbye.